We only have one item on the agenda, but could be a long agenda. A lot of good material here, and I think it's important. Now, we've been through this before, so this is not completely new. In some ways, I'm not sure if the big cell towers got us used to something like this, but we've had a couple of these, small cell wire facilities. As you ride around Marlborough, they don't look bad. I rode by pole 34 today on Farm Road, and a box there, 36.6 feet up, probably won't look too bad. But I think the key is that we got to move forward on this, that I think people in Marlborough want better, reception. I think Councilor Doucette, you mentioned that last week, that particular part of Farm Road is bad. Okay, so the order that we have tonight is order number 22108-695. Petition of Verizon Wireless for the installation of a small cell wireless facility to be located on pole 34 within the outlay of the public ways near 385 Farm Road. Okay, I'm going to start in with, by the way, somehow, I just came from Boston. It took me 2 hours and 18 minutes to come from Brookline, Boston, out here. Somewhere along the line, I wasn't in an airplane, I popped my right ear. So it's humming, it's not listening, it's not talking, but I think I'm all right on this side. So if I sit like that, you'll understand. But what I am going to start with, the representative from Liz Glidden from Verizon in her crowd. You can sit in the, we used to call it the well, I'm not sure what we call it now. So Liz, if you want to do the highlights, some of the areas that
sorry.
Now, what we have to keep in mind, this is also for the benefit of the city councilors, the other ones that can. So the residents of Marlborough, are quite interested in things, and they have some concerns, some reservations. So that's what we want to solve tonight. Let the residents of Marlborough realize that there are trade-offs. We've got to sometimes have something 36 feet up a pole. Ooh, that's good right now. And also, people want better service. So I'm going to give you the floor for now, and then I will open it up to the members of the committee, and then I will open it up to the rest of the city councilors and see how far we can get tonight.
Okay.
It's all yours, Liz.
Thank you. As the commissioner said, my name is Liz Glidden. I work with the real estate and regulatory for Verizon Wireless. I have two RF engineers with me tonight, Brian Williams and Stephen Nurkowski, and they'll be able to speak to some of the RF questions that came up in our preliminary meeting. Just to begin, Verizon Wireless is interested in addressing some coverage concerns that we have on Farm Road. As you know, there's a school located there. It's a busy road, and there are some coverage gaps that we are seeking to resolve. And whenever we have a situation like that, we look at a number of different utility poles along the road. As most of you are aware, we have an agreement with NGrid, like we do with most of the utilities in the state, that we can go on their poles provided certain conditions are met. So when possible, we try to do that. That's the least intrusive way to obtain coverage. And it helps kind of narrowly address a particular area. So when this coverage deficiency came to our attention, we looked at a number of poles on Farm Road. I know that I sent them to Karen Boulay, who I'm sure sent them to you. I don't know that I need to go through this list specifically pole by pole, but most of the poles on Farm Road had some kind of issue that would prohibit us from co-locating or attaching onto that pole, whether it's risers or transformers or whether it's a junction pole. So we did look at all of the poles. There was one pole that did actually meet our criteria, but it was further away from the specific area that we were seeking to cover. And it's at a slightly lower elevation, and there's a bend in the road. So given the two sites, we felt that the one that we selected at 385 would be around 385, pole 34, would be a better solution for us. That's a little bit about our site selection process. We know that you had some questions and some emails about RF emissions. I brought two of our engineers with us. I wanted to point out that we did revise the necessity case that had those websites in it, that those websites had a typo, so if you go to the 4th page, those have been corrected. I also included just a common radio frequency exposure handout that really demonstrates that, you know, this type of attachment is well within the parameters of normal things, normal Internet of Things type things. And I will let Stephen and Brian speak to that a little bit more. I think, I don't know if the best thing to do is to turn it over to them, or if you wanted to go back to some original questions.
I continue. I've got Steve. That is going to be the topic that's going to come up. So let him present it, and then that might generate questions from the members of the committee and also from the city councilors. So.
Okay. So, Stephen, one of the questions that came up at the preliminary hearing was how does the emissions work, and how do we know that it's within the correct parameters? And I know that we did a specific study. We had a third party do a study, and I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so what the study shows is the RF emissions at that location with the device, the antenna and the radio that we picked for this location. And what it really shows is small cells, and this small cell in particular is well below the FCC limit for RF emissions. And the way to visualize how this works is you have an antenna, and say like your hand here is the antenna, and each of my fingers is like a lobe of RF emissions. And when you're coming out exactly straight off the antenna, that's where you have the highest emissions. So when you're at 35 feet, that is where we're going to have by far the highest emissions, and it goes maybe 10 feet off from the antenna. And it's pretty much like a donut shape around it, the way the antenna pattern is. And once you're past that 10 feet, the RF emissions drop off significantly, and you're within maybe 1% of the FCC limit for emissions. So it's very negligible once you get a certain distance. And even, you know, when you're right below the pole, like kind of similar to what I'm showing here, there's really no antenna beams that are aimed straight down. So even if you're below the pole, you're very well within the FCC limits for emissions.
Okay, a good explanation. Why don't I open this up to members of the committee of the public services and then other city councilors? That seemed to be a concern over the years. And so I think this might be a good time if you have any additional questions, members of the committee, and then we can expand it to non-members. We got two members here. We got Councilor.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not have any follow-up questions. A lot of them were answered. I do thank you for sending over the revised spreadsheet on the weekend. One thing in the past, the last few years, I can understand where residents feel on some of these RFE frequencies. I know I do subscribe to it that could be an individual recovering from Lyme disease. There's been talks about that. I didn't know in this study if you've seen anything like that that has been with the frequencies that have been targeted to someone that may have had a medical issue at all in any of these studies that you've seen.
The studies that I've seen by third parties, so this is non-ionizing RF, so it is not the hot RF, hot emissions.
Correct.
And those are what have been found to be the most detrimental. So, not surprising since I'm a Verizon employee. I have not seen studies, or I've seen articles, critiquing it, but the third-party studies that I've done, that I've seen from credible sources, have shown that there is no effect. And I can't speak to specifically to Lyme disease.
Absolutely. And I do realize, and like I said, thank you very much for all that information. And I do know it is controlled by the FCC, and so we are limited and still learning. So I understand that. It was something that I was curious about. But
sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Irish.
It's maybe I can say something, that every site that we build or every carrier we add, we always carry out a safety report. We always carry out a study. There's nothing that we build that we don't do a study before we actually build anything. And if there's any safety concerns, we will mitigate those by turning the power down. And we also clearly mark any areas where you would be going into a safety concern. In this case, usually we have two plots. We send you out a plot. You'll see a plot at 35 feet, or the distance at the height that we're transmitting. And the reason for that is if we didn't show that plot, you would see nothing. Because as you go lower, your signal is, as Stephen said, your signal is going down significantly. So if we said we sent you a plot at ground level, there would be nothing there.
Very interesting. Councilor Perlman, you're members of the committee. Do you have some comments or questions?
Sorry, no, I'll add a supplemental thing. If anybody has a problem with my accent, I will repeat, because I know it's a kind of unusual accent.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Councilor Perlman. I looked at last year's assignments, but now that I did call you on you, do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's okay. We'll still be honorary committee, even though I'm not on it this year. No, I appreciate the study, the information, the outline about why each poll location may or may not have been a good candidate. I know we did receive the inquiry from the resident who was concerned about the impact of this site, and having explained kind of where the most concern would be closest to this very high pole where the small cell wireless facility would be. I don't know if there are other mitigation efforts that could exist, but I recognize that we are subject to the FCC standards and what's been kind of universally done in other polls. I was just curious. I know you mentioned like safety concerns that could be implemented. Is there any sort of designations around the pole?
Those wouldn't be so much on poles. Those would be more on rooftops, where you would basically maybe on on a plant room, you would have an antenna, say, maybe only 5 feet above the ground level. That would be the mitigation there. But in poles, because you're so high up, you would have to be basically 9 feet in front of that pole. So I suppose the only scenario would be is if somebody's working on the pole. That would be the only scenario.
Okay, no, that's helpful. I appreciate it. And just given the number of these that we see in the community, it might be useful for us as a city maybe to just provide some of this baseline information on the website just so it can kind of answer some initial questions for residents, just given the fact that I'm sure these questions will continue to arise, and having any of these third-party studies available or some of the decision-making factors, you know, regardless of, you know, what we can do locally, but also the FCC conditions as well. That might just be useful moving forward. So no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very much for your comments. Okay, Councilor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So thank you for the information. Do appreciate that, specifically the radiation graph, because it does point out that basically the small cells put out about the effective power output that a laptop would that's closer to you, or Bluetooth headset. So it's just that it's further away. I'm just a little rusty on my RF. Is it power goes down R cubed, distance cubed? Is that true? Is it squared or cubed? The power dissipation on our RF?
It's been a while since I looked at the formula, but I think it's an inverse square. The power goes down really quickly.
Oh, yeah. I know there's a power involved.
Yeah. It goes. I think it's an inverse square, but
right.
I wouldn't swear on that because it's been a while since I looked at the formula.
Right. Same with me. So that's, you know. But the constituent who expressed a concern actually lives on a hill that overlooks Farm Road and is between 30 and 50 feet high, so that the RF antenna is literally going to be pointing into their backyard. You know, that's why they expressed their concerns. I don't think the distance is that much, because it's going to be 50 to 100 feet away from the actual pole, but in their case, the distance works against them as far as exposure goes. They get more exposure or better reception. I don't think there's anything we can do to stop this from being installed, and I agree that this is a good place to put it geographically on Farm Road. But I don't think that because the new cells have such low power that they really don't have that much of an impact. It's relative to what a laptop would do or something like that. I mean, you can't even buy a laptop with an Ethernet port anymore. It's got to be wireless. So, you know, the power dissipation is about the same, so I don't think there's an issue with that either. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Doucette. Are there any other councilors that have questions or comments they'd like to add to it? Councilor Orman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question I would have is, as you described this cell tower, basically, can it be set up directionally, so if the house is here and the pole is here and you're trying to not interfere with the house, can you set the power directionally so it doesn't affect the house as much as the rest of the area that you're trying to capture? Because I'm sure you're not trying to capture that one house. So I was curious, are these, is there an option to do that?
This is because it's a small cell, it's an omni antenna, which means it basically radiates out equally in the circle area. What you're talking about would be a directional antenna. So that would be a far bigger site. So you would have more radios, etc., to build the site. So, but in this case, because it's like a canister, it's designed to be least visibly intrusive. You know, so it's just, it radiates all over the direction. To answer your question, we aren't specifically going for that house. We're going for the area that needs coverage, not the specific house.
Okay, and then one other question, if I may, Mr. Chair. This was a nice little guide you sent us, and it talks about a baby monitor at 7 feet. It also talks about the small cells outdoors, the bottom one that we're talking about at 1,000 feet. Do we know how many, 1,000 cubic, microwatts per cubic centimeter? Centimeter squared. Do we know the footage? Like, when you measure that 1,000, is that at 7 feet, or is that at 100 feet? Do we know what that 1,000, that exposure is at how many feet? How many feet would you get that exposure at?
I don't think we can really speak to that because this is not something that we put together. I think, Liz, you found this. Okay. It looks like through a source, the board, like a certified health physicist study here. So that's not exactly something we can speak to.
Yeah, I noticed it only showed one item, the baby monitor at 7 feet. The rest, it doesn't talk about how many feet away do you have to be to get that radio frequency exposure. So that's why I was curious about this. I thought it was helpful, but then I said, well, how do I compare a baby monitor to the rest of it?
Yeah.
Feet, you know.
Well, something to add to that is, as you can see, there's a little note on the bottom. So maximum exposure is generally taken to be worst case, and that's the same with the study that we presented to you as well. Is even the power, we're putting everything that we're showing at full power, when in reality it's never, most of the time is not going to be operating at full power. It depends on how far the user is from the antenna, how many people are using the site at a time, and unless someone was having maybe like a big party in the neighborhood and a few hundred people showed up, it's not going to be operating at full power.
So there's no way to know the distance in feet on exposure. The 1,000, let me get it right, the 1,000 microwatts per centimeter squared, that number is based on footage?
I'm not sure on this study here, but
what's yours going to emit?
It's going to be, if you're roughly 10 feet, say you're up 35 feet in the air, right? If you're within 10 feet from the antenna, that's where you're at high exposure.
So that would be the 1,000 that this chart shows, or do you know offhand if that's a different number?
I don't know offhand, but you would be close to the FCC limit if you're 10 feet from the antenna.
Okay, you compare it that way.
Yes.
Okay. That's where this chart was helpful, but then I said, well, how do you compare it to what you're proposing?
Yeah, this is really just to show, like, in comparison to, like, you look at, like a laptop or...
It was interesting.
Yeah, just something like that that's an everyday item is many times, you're exposed to more emissions.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Good comment. Back to Councilor Doucette.
Thank you much, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify the graph, the larger bar is the permissible exposure for each of the elements. So in the case of small cells, macro cells, it's about 1,000 microwatts. The green part that's on the far left is what the actual emissions are. So that the small cells outdoors is 0.05 out of 1,000, and then the Wi-Fi is 0.02, the wireless laptop is 0.8, FM and TV is 0.1, Bluetooth is 3, mobile phone is 310. So just, and again, it's worst case, if you're downloading onto your phone a video stream, it's going to be broadcasting a lot more than if you're just listening to local audio. So I think it's important we understand that, and just, the conclusion I said is this is not a big emissions issue, and I think it would be fine. So, thank you.
Councilor Roby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming again tonight and for providing the updated information. I'm sure that it is helpful both to the council and for the public that may be listening to the meeting. I know that there's always concern about the issues of radio frequency. I guess I am more curious about the pole itself, and we received a letter today from the city engineer indicating that the pole is being replaced. And is it being replaced to help you with the height that you need for this particular unit, or were they going to replace it anyway?
I can't say. All I can say is that when we approached NGrid about doing this application, we don't need that, I don't want to say we don't need the height, but the height, they are not installing that tall of a pole to provide us with additional height. They are installing that pole to meet separating distances for one thing, and that could be amongst among the comm lines, the primary power lines, and other attachers. It could be the pole condition is deteriorating, and either they were going to replace it anyway, or they're using this as an opportunity to replace the pole. We don't replace the pole, so that is something that's determined and comes from NGrid.
Okay, and I guess I ask because our current ordinance has a height limit, and if this is going to be a recurring issue because of the height that, or the difference that needs to be on poles that exist, and so NGrid would be changing poles, it would be nice to know so that we might want to change our ordinance to have a variable height depending on the circumstances, rather than to continually having to look at that fact. And
yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. So the FCC defines a small cell as anything under 50 feet. Most utilities, the tallest pole that they would install is 45 feet. And if I'm not mistaken, in Marlborough, I think in most cases it's 40, it would be like 40 feet. So we know that it can't be taller than 50 feet because it won't meet the definition of a small cell.
okay,
We know it's unlikely that it's going to be more than 45 feet because the utility companies generally don't install poles that are that tall. So it would be helpful. And I think we're somewhat at the mercy of the utility. I mean, they're certainly a partner of ours, but they determine the height of the pole that they're going to put in, and we don't know what their future plans are. Perhaps they put in this pole height because they see a greater need, they see additional fiber carriers, they see something that we are, unaware of.
okay. And are you aware that because of Marlborough's concern for double poles, that this unit cannot be installed, assuming a grant is given, until the new pole is installed and the old pole is removed?
Yeah, I think we can accept that. Again, the other pole is Verizon Telephone. I realize we're all under the umbrella name of Verizon. It is a completely different corporation, but we can try to work with both to make sure that that there's not a double pole situation.
Okay, and I'm sure that the city engineer can do some pushing if he needs to make sure it all gets taken care of.
Yeah, I actually had a question, and unfortunately, I just got the city engineer comments, I think, an hour ago, and I was driving here. So I think as you are all aware, we've had 3 other polls in Marlborough that have gone through this process, and they are over 35 feet in height. I don't know if we need to ask for a waiver or if that's something that can be done in this case. This is the first time I'm going through this process. In the past, we had an attorney do it. I guess my hope is that we can ask for a waiver and install at the height that has been proposed in this plan.
And I believe there's language in what was sent by the city's assistant city solicitor to cover that issue. It's not really a waiver, it's just saying that relief is given.
Okay, good.
Which I think has been similar to what we've done in the past, because those poles were also over 33 feet. So again, it's the issue that we probably need to change the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Councilor Roby's correct. We came across this the last time, And the solicitor and the engineer said, yep, it's okay, but it's best upon us to change the ordinance. So I will ask Karen to remind me, we'll draft some language to the ordinance and submit the ordinance change to the council. Because the applicant is correct, the FCC allows, we can't be more restrictive than what the FCC says. So our ordinance really needs to be adjusted. So we will take that on our own to do that. That's independent of this decision, but something we will take up after the fact.
Okay, well, we appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, good point, Mr. President. I think that's something we should move on, but you don't want poles here, 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 here. In fact, I noticed driving down Farm, or walking down Farm Road today, that I thought the poles were in pretty good shape. And they all seemed like to be pretty good height, and they were put in well. I was impressed by someone went through and evaluated every pole, and I suppose it's easier for National Grid to do it because some have transformers on it and some have a, oh, I forget the other thing, something that I think that's connected to something, you know. So, and by the way, Liz, I think we've done 2 or 3 others, and way back I was on the, when we used to do towers. I think the material that you supplied to us, you know, was good, excellent. Some of it I'd like to get a little earlier, but we're all at fault there, you know.
Well, we're happy to provide it. You know, we understand your situation, and that you have constituents that you need to work with, and, you know, as we see you as a partner, and as we move forward, if there's additional information that we can provide, we're happy to do that.
Very good. Are there any other councilors that would like to contribute or question or what have you? Mr. President, I didn't plan on wrapping this up tonight, but I wouldn't mind wrapping it up tonight. Because actually we technically have until February 23rd, I think, to do it. But if we can move forward. Now, Councilor Roby, you're next on the agenda. I think your meeting should start at, should have started.
I think we can all adjust to the need to overrun a meeting as one is scheduled after the other. So I believe Councilor Irish is at the ready to raise his hand and move something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was ready to make a motion to approve with the city engineer's conditions.
That was the key, yes.
That was the key, Mr. Chair, yes.
Okay. Do I have a motion coming from you?
Yes, motion to approve order number 22-100-8695 with the conditions from the city engineer.
Okay, I'll second that. All in favor, the 2 of us? Yes.
I guess just to clarify, we received new condition, or an actual new order from the assistant solicitor that I believe incorporate the conditions of the city engineer.
So they can make a motion, they can make a motion to approve it and then send it to the solicitor to put in proper format for vote at a future meeting. How's
Right,
that?
that was kind of what I was getting at. They
Okay.
really need to be approving the amended order.
Okay, so we have our vote 2-0. Yep.
Yes.
Okay, motion to?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn 2-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I don't know if I can speak or if it's all over.
One more time, Liz?
Can I speak? Or if
No, the
you-
meeting's over.
Meeting's
Oh,
over.
meeting's over, okay.
Yeah.
I guess my question is a point of clarification. The last set of